The storm rolled in like a living thing, crawling down from the mountains and swallowing the Wild West plains in a blur of white. Caleb Hart had lived through many winters, but this one carried a cruel edge. The wind cut like a knife, and the snow fell so thick it erased the horizon. He was guiding his horse along the frozen creek when he noticed a dark shape half buried near the bank. At first he nearly rode past it, thinking it was a fallen tree or a dead animal claimed by the cold. Then the shape moved, just barely. Caleb slid from his saddle and pushed through the snow. What he found made him draw a sharp breath. An Apache woman lay collapsed against the ice, her long braids stiff with frost, her buckskin clothing torn and soaked. Her skin was pale, her lips tinged blue, and her breathing was shallow, like it might stop at any moment. The storm had nearly claimed her. Without wasting a second, Caleb shrugged off his coat and wrapped it tightly around her fragile frame. She stirred weakly, letting out a soft sound that was half breath, half plea. Lifting her carefully, Caleb placed her across his horse and climbed on behind her, shielding her from the wind as best he could. The ride back to his cabin felt endless. Snow stung his eyes, and the horse struggled through drifts. But Caleb refused to slow. He had seen death before on the frontier, and he would not let it take her, not today. When he finally reached the cabin, he carried her inside and laid her near the fire. He fed the flames until the room glowed orange and warm, then knelt beside her, rubbing her hands, coaxing life back into them. Slowly, painfully, color returned to her cheeks. Her eyes fluttered open, dark and sharp with fear. She tried to pull away, but she was too weak. "Easy," Caleb said quietly, his voice low and steady. "You're safe here." She stared at him, breathing hard, her gaze searching his face as if weighing truth against danger. Outside, the storm raged, battering the small cabin, but inside there was only the crackle of fire and the strange closeness of two lives colliding. As exhaustion claimed her once more, she drifted into sleep in the bed of a quiet cowboy, unaware that this night born of cold and chance would change both their fates forever. Morning arrived gently, light slipping through the small cabin window and settling across the woman's face. Ayanna woke slowly, her body aching but warm, the deep bite of the cold finally gone. For a moment, confusion filled her mind. The ceiling above her was made of rough wood, not sky, and the air smelled of smoke, leather, and pine. Then memory returned, the storm, the freezing wind, and the cowboy's strong arms lifting her from the snow. She pushed herself upright, heart pounding, ready to flee if danger appeared. The room was quiet except for the soft creak of the cabin and the faint hiss of dying embers in the fireplace. Across the room, the cowboy sat at a small table, his back to her. He was repairing a torn saddle strap, his movements calm and unhurried, as if he had all the time in the world. When he sensed her stirring, he turned his head slightly. "You're awake," he said, his voice low and even. There was no surprise in it, no demand, just a simple acknowledgement. Ayanna watched him closely. He did not move toward her, did not reach for a weapon. Instead, he placed a tin cup of water and a small plate of food on the edge of the table and slid them closer, then returned to his work. That restraint eased the tightness in her chest. Carefully she spoke, her English slow but clear. She told him her name and how she had been tracking game when the storm rose suddenly, scattering the land and stealing her strength. Caleb listened without interruption. When she finished, he nodded once. He told her his name, said he lived alone, and that the land could be unforgiving to anyone caught unprepared. His words were few, but his actions spoke more. He added wood to the fire, made sure she was wrapped in dry blankets, and kept a respectful distance. As the hours passed, Ayanna regained strength. She studied the small details of the cabin, the rifle above the door, the worn boots by the wall, the quiet order of a man used to solitude. Outside, the storm began to fade, but unease replaced it. She knew soldiers sometimes rode these lands, and being found here could bring danger to them both. When she spoke of this, Caleb's jaw tightened. He said he could guide her toward the foothills after dark, where the land would hide her tracks. Their eyes met, and in that silence, trust began to form, fragile as ice yet stronger than fear, wrapped in snow and silence. Ayanna rode behind Caleb, the steady rhythm of the horse calming her thoughts. The cold no longer burned her skin, but it lingered in the air, sharp and watchful. Each breath rose like smoke as they moved through the open plains toward the distant hills. The world felt paused, as if even nature was holding its breath. Caleb spoke little, but when he did, his words were gentle. He pointed out safe paths where the snow was thin and warned her of frozen streams hidden beneath white blankets. Ayanna listened, memorizing the land, grateful for his guidance. In return, she told him about her people, how they read the wind and stars, how survival was woven into every story passed down through generations. He listened with quiet respect, never interrupting, never questioning her truth. As they rode, something unseen grew between them. It was not loud or reckless, but steady, like the slow thaw of ice beneath the sun. Ayanna noticed how he watched the horizon before turning, how he always positioned himself between her and the open land, as if danger itself might appear. Caleb, in turn, felt the weight of her presence, strong despite the hardship she had endured. She was not broken by the storm, only tested by it. When they reached the ridge, Caleb brought the horse to a stop. Below them stretched a wide valley leading into the foothills, shadowed and safe. He helped her down, their hands brushing briefly, sending a quiet jolt through them both. For a moment, neither spoke. The wind whispered across the snow, carrying the truth that this was where their paths would separate. "This is far enough," Caleb said softly. "From here you'll be safe." Ayanna met his gaze, her eyes steady and grateful. She reached into a small pouch and pulled out a carved token, smoothed by time and careful hands. Placing it in his palm, she closed his fingers around it. "You saved my life," she said. "That binds us, even if we walk different roads." Caleb wanted to say more, but the words stayed trapped in his chest. Instead, he nodded. Ayanna turned and began her descent into the valley, her figure growing smaller with each step. Caleb watched until she vanished among the hills. The silence returned, but it felt different now, no longer empty. He rode back alone, the token warm in his hand, knowing that one frozen night had changed him forever. Weeks passed, yet the memory of that frozen night refused to fade. Caleb returned to his routines, mending fences, riding the range, listening to the wind sweep across the plains, but the quiet no longer felt complete. The small carved token Ayanna had given him stayed in his pocket, warmed by his hand whenever his thoughts drifted too far. He found himself watching the horizon more often, half expecting a familiar silhouette to emerge from the snow or dust. One late afternoon, as the land began to thaw and patches of earth showed through the white, Caleb noticed smoke rising far beyond the foothills. It wasn't the careless smoke of hunters or soldiers. It was deliberate, controlled. His instincts stirred. Against his better judgment, he saddled his horse and rode toward it, the token pressing against his palm like a warning and a promise all at once. As he drew closer, he heard voices, Apache voices. Caleb slowed, keeping his distance, hands open, showing no threat. Ayanna stepped into view, her posture alert but calm. For a long moment, they simply stared at one another, surprise giving way to recognition. She had recovered fully, strength returned to her eyes. Yet something softened when she saw him standing there alone. She approached carefully, explaining that her people had moved camps after the storm, wary of soldiers pressing closer to their land. Caleb told her of riders he had seen weeks earlier, how he had altered his routes to avoid leading danger her way. His honesty did not go unnoticed. Elders watched from a distance, measuring him in silence. That evening, Caleb was offered food and warmth beside their fire. He spoke little as always, but listened deeply. Stories were shared, laughter rose, and the land felt alive in a way his cabin never had. Ayanna sat beside him, not too close, not too far. There was comfort in that space between them. When night fell, Ayanna walked with him to the edge of the camp. She told him their worlds were still divided, that danger lingered on every trail. Caleb nodded, understanding more than words could say. "Still," he replied quietly, "the land has a way of crossing paths again." She smiled then, a small, knowing smile. As Caleb rode away under a sky thick with stars, he realized the bond between them had not ended at the ridge. It had only changed form, rooted now in respect, shared silence, and the enduring pull of two lives shaped by the same unforgiving land.